You have been drinking your morning coffee black, no sugar, no cream, nothing. You are doing this because you understand the 12-hour rule. You know that closing the kitchen at 7 and not eating until 7 the next morning creates the overnight fasting window that improves your glucose, allows your liver to recalibrate, and triggers the cellular repair processes we have discussed in this series. You are committed. You are consistent. But this morning, the coffee was bitter. You reached for the sweetener packet, the one that says 0 calories on the label, the one that has no sugar, the one that logically should not break a fast at all. You stirred it in, you drank it, and now you are wondering, did I just break my fast? Did I undo the overnight work my body was doing? Is the 0 on that label telling me the whole truth? Today, I want to give you a clear, honest, evidence-based answer to that question, because it is more nuanced than most people expect. And because the answer has real implications, not just for fasting, but for blood sugar management, gut health, and insulin sensitivity, the things this entire series is built around. Let us start with what zero-calorie sweeteners actually are. Zero-calorie sweeteners, also called artificial sweeteners, non-nutritive sweeteners, or sugar substitutes, are compounds that taste intensely sweet but provide little to no caloric energy, and in most cases are not metabolized the way glucose is. The most common ones you will encounter are sucralose, which is sold under the brand name Splenda; aspartame, which is found in many diet sodas and is one of the most studied food additives in history; ace-sulfame potassium, often abbreviated as ACE-K, which is frequently combined with other sweeteners to improve taste; saccharin, one of the oldest artificial sweeteners, sold under the brand name Sweet and Low; which is derived from a plant and is often marketed as more natural than the synthetic alternatives; and monk fruit extract, another plant-derived sweetener that has gained popularity in recent years. Each of these works differently in the body, and each has a different answer to the question of whether it breaks a fast or affects blood sugar. Let me take you through the 3 questions that matter most. The first question is, do zero-calorie sweeteners raise blood sugar directly? For most of them, the answer is no, not directly, not in the way that glucose or sucrose does. Sucralose, aspartame, ace-sulfame K, saccharin, stevia, and monk fruit do not contain glucose. They are not broken down into glucose in the small intestine the way carbohydrates are. Your blood sugar monitor will not show a spike 30 minutes after drinking a cup of black coffee with a packet of sucralose in it. This is why they are widely used in diabetic-friendly products. And this is the truth behind the zero-calorie label. But the question of whether they break a fast, and the question of whether they affect blood sugar management, requires looking beyond the direct glucose response. The second question is, do zero-calorie sweeteners cause an insulin response? This is where the science becomes more interesting and more contested. The traditional view has been that because artificial sweeteners do not raise blood sugar, they do not cause a meaningful insulin response. And for many sweeteners, this appears to be largely true. However, a phenomenon called the cephalic phase insulin response complicates this picture. The cephalic phase insulin response is a reflexive, anticipatory release of insulin that is triggered by the taste of sweetness before any glucose actually enters the bloodstream. Your body, having learned over a lifetime that sweet taste means glucose is coming, begins releasing a small amount of insulin the moment sweet taste receptors on your tongue are activated. This is an evolutionary adaptation. The body prepares for incoming glucose the moment it detects sweetness. It is getting the insulin ready before the glucose arrives, the way a kitchen prepares plates before the food is served. Several studies have shown that sweet taste alone, even from non-caloric sweeteners, can trigger this cephalic phase insulin response. The response is small. It is not the robust insulin surge you get from eating a bowl of white rice, but it is not zero. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that sucralose consumption was associated with a 20% greater insulin response when consumed before a glucose load compared to water. In other words, drinking something sweet with sucralose before eating carbohydrates caused the body to release more insulin in response to those carbohydrates than if water had been consumed instead. The mechanism is not fully understood, but the sweet taste signal appears to prime the insulin system, making it more responsive when actual glucose arrives shortly after. For the purposes of fasting, this means that zero-calorie sweeteners in your morning coffee may not be raising blood sugar directly, but they may be nudging the insulin system out of the deeply fasted, low insulin state that produces the metabolic benefits of the overnight fast. Whether this nudge is large enough to meaningfully disrupt the benefits of your 12-hour fast is genuinely debated among researchers. The honest answer is probably not dramatically. but probably not completely zero either. The third question, and this is the one most people have never considered, is what do zero-calorie sweeteners do to the gut microbiome? This is where the research has become increasingly concerning over the last decade. And it is, I believe, the most important part of this conversation for anyone managing blood sugar and insulin resistance. You will remember from our discussions of the second meal effect and the gut bacteria video that the microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your large intestine, plays a direct role in blood sugar management. These bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids that improve insulin sensitivity, stimulate GLP-1 release, reduce inflammation, and regulate how fast glucose enters the bloodstream after meals. The composition of your gut microbiome matters enormously for metabolic health, and it is significantly affected by what you eat, including what you drink. Multiple studies, including a landmark study published in the journal Nature in 2014 by researchers Ilinov and Segal at the Weizmann Institute of Science, found that common artificial sweeteners, specifically saccharin, sucralose, and aspartame, significantly altered the gut microbiome in ways that impaired glucose metabolism. The Nature study found that mice consuming these sweeteners developed glucose intolerance, a measurable deterioration in blood sugar management that was directly attributable to changes in gut bacteria. When the researchers transferred the gut bacteria from sweetener-consuming mice into germ-free mice, those recipient mice also developed glucose intolerance. The metabolic disruption was carried in the bacteria, not in the sweetener itself. In human subjects, the same research group found that some individuals who consumed saccharin developed significant microbiome changes and glucose intolerance within 1 week of daily consumption. Subsequent research has extended these findings. A 2022 study published in Cell, one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world, examined the effects of 4 popular non-caloric sweeteners on the gut microbiome and glucose responses in healthy adults. The sweeteners tested were saccharin, sucralose, aspartame, and stevia. All 4 sweeteners altered the gut microbiome composition compared to controls who consumed glucose or had no intervention. Saccharin and sucralose specifically produced the most significant changes in blood glucose responses, not by raising blood sugar directly, but by disrupting the microbial ecosystem that regulates how efficiently blood sugar is managed. The mechanism involves the fact that artificial sweeteners, particularly sucralose and saccharin, are not fully absorbed by the human gut. They pass into the large intestine largely intact, where they interact directly with gut bacteria. Some bacteria are disrupted or reduced by this exposure. Others proliferate. The balance shifts. And that shifted balance has measurable consequences for metabolic function. Now let me be precise about what this means practically. The research does not show that a single packet of sucralose in your morning coffee will destroy your gut microbiome and cause diabetes. The effects observed in studies are generally associated with regular, consistent, daily consumption over weeks and months. But for someone who is using artificial sweeteners in coffee multiple times per day, every day, for years, which describes many people who have switched from sugary beverages to diet versions, the cumulative effect on the gut microbiome is a legitimate concern, particularly for someone whose metabolic health is already compromised by insulin resistance. You have worked throughout this series to build a gut microbiome that supports your blood sugar management. You have added fermentable fiber through legumes and barley. You have added anti-inflammatory fats through olive oil and fatty fish. You have added probiotics through Greek yogurt. You have been feeding the bacteria that produce the short-chain fatty acids that improve insulin sensitivity. Using artificial sweeteners daily is to some degree working against that investment. Now let me give you a clearer picture of where each major sweetener stands on the research spectrum. Saccharin and sucralose have the strongest evidence for gut microbiome disruption based on current research. The 2014 Nature study and the 2022 Cell study both found significant microbiome changes with these sweeteners. For someone managing blood sugar and insulin resistance, these are the sweeteners I would be most cautious about using regularly. Aspartame has a mixed profile in the literature. It does not appear to alter the gut microbiome as significantly as saccharin or sucralose in current research, and it is not present in the large intestine in the same way because it is partially broken down in the small intestine. However, aspartame breaks down into phenylalanine and aspartic acid amino acids and methanol in small amounts. The amino acids it produces can stimulate a small insulin response in some individuals, and people with a condition called phenylketonuria should avoid it entirely. The overall research picture on aspartame and blood sugar is less alarming than saccharin and sucralose, but it is also the most studied and most debated sweetener in history, and caution is warranted. Stevia appears to have the most favorable profile among commonly used sweeteners for blood sugar management. Several studies have found that stevia does not significantly alter the gut microbiome in the ways that synthetic sweeteners do. Some research has actually suggested modest beneficial effects on blood sugar. A few small studies found that stevia consumption was associated with slightly lower post-meal glucose and insulin responses compared to sucrose. The cephalic phase insulin response appears to be less pronounced with stevia than with synthetic sweeteners, possibly because the taste profile of stevia, while sweet, is slightly different from sucrose. The research on stevia is far from conclusive, but it currently represents the most evidence-informed choice among the common sweetener options. Monk fruit extract is less well studied than stevia or the synthetic sweeteners, but the available evidence does not show significant negative effects on blood sugar or gut microbiome. It is generally considered a reasonable alternative to synthetic sweeteners based on current data. Now let me answer the original question directly. Does a zero-calorie sweetener in your morning coffee break your fast? It depends on what you mean by break. If you mean will it raise blood sugar directly, the answer is generally no. If you mean will it trigger a small insulin response through the cephalic phase reflex, possibly, especially with synthetic sweeteners. The response is small but not zero. If you mean will it meaningfully disrupt the full suite of metabolic benefits of your overnight fast, including autophagy, liver recalibration, and insulin baseline restoration, probably not from a single packet in a single cup of coffee. But with regular daily use, the gut microbiome effects accumulate in ways that work against the metabolic goals your fasting window is designed to support. The most honest answer is, it depends on the sweetener, the amount, and how consistently you are using it. Plain black coffee genuinely does not break a fast in any meaningful way. A moderate amount of stevia or monk fruit in your coffee is unlikely to significantly disrupt your fasting benefits. Daily large amounts of sucralose or saccharin are a different story, not because of the fasting window specifically, but because of what they appear to do to the gut microbiome over time. Let me tell you about Eleanor. Eleanor was 67 years old, a retired school librarian, methodical, attentive, and genuinely committed to her health. She had been managing type 2 diabetes for 5 years and had made remarkable progress over the 8 months she had been applying the protocols from our work together. Her A1C had dropped from 7.9 to 7.1. Her morning readings were more consistent. Her post-meal spikes were significantly reduced. But there was a plateau. Her numbers had stopped improving. Not declining, just flat. And her gut-related symptoms, some bloating, occasional digestive irregularity, had persisted despite her careful attention to fermentable fiber and probiotic foods. When I asked her about her beverage habits, she told me she drank 3 to 4 cups of coffee per day. Black, as we had discussed. But each cup had 2 packets of sucralose in it. 8 packets of sucralose per day. Every day, for years. She had never considered this relevant because sucralose has no calories and no sugar. The label said 0. She believed the label completely. We made one change. We replaced her sucralose with a small amount of liquid stevia, 2 to 3 drops per cup, and she discovered, to her surprise, that 2 drops was sufficient sweetness. She was using far more sucralose than she actually needed to achieve the flavor she wanted. 8 weeks later, she reported that her digestive symptoms had improved noticeably, and her morning glucose readings had become more consistent. The unexplained variability that had persisted through the plateau began to settle. Her A1C at the next test, 6.9. A continued improvement, no change to her diet, no change to her medication, no change to her movement habits or timing protocols. One change to what was in her coffee cup. She looked at her results and said something that has stayed with me. I thought 0 meant nothing was happening. I didn't understand that 0 on the calorie label didn't mean 0 on the biology. That is the most important line in this entire video. 0 on the calorie label does not mean 0 on the biology. Let me give you the practical framework clearly. If you are in your fasting window and want to drink coffee or tea, the safest choices in order of evidence are plain black coffee or plain black tea. No sweetener of any kind. 0 cephalic phase response. 0 gut microbiome impact. The gold standard for maintaining full fasting benefits. A small amount of plain stevia or monk fruit extract. 2 to 3 drops of liquid stevia or a small amount of pure monk fruit extract without additional additives. The least evidence of microbiome disruption, the most favorable blood sugar profile among sweeteners. If you genuinely cannot tolerate black coffee and this is the difference between maintaining your fast and not, stevia is a reasonable choice. Moderate use of aspartame. Less microbiome concern than sucralose or saccharin based on current research, but still a cephalic phase response and ongoing research uncertainties. Better than sucralose or saccharin for daily use, but plain coffee remains preferable. Regular daily use of sucralose or saccharin. The evidence for gut microbiome disruption with these sweeteners is the most consistent and the most concerning for people who are actively working to improve metabolic health through microbiome support. If you are using these daily, consider transitioning to stevia or monk fruit, or working toward reducing sweetener use gradually. One practical note on the transition. Many people who have used sweeteners for years find black coffee or tea genuinely unpalatable at first. This is partly habit and partly the fact that chronic sweet taste exposure alters taste perception, making unsweetened beverages seem more bitter than they actually are. If you want to reduce sweetener use, the most sustainable approach is gradual reduction over several weeks. Reduce the amount slightly each week rather than eliminating it immediately. The palate adapts. Within 3 to 4 weeks of gradual reduction, most people find that significantly less sweetener, or none at all, is needed to find coffee acceptable. Adding a small amount of cinnamon to coffee, which we have discussed for its blood sugar benefits, also naturally softens the perception of bitterness and reduces the perceived need for sweeteners. It is worth trying. Before I close, the reminder that belongs at the end of every video. If you are managing diabetes or any metabolic condition with medication, the changes we have discussed, including switching sweeteners, reducing their use, or eliminating them, are very unlikely to require medication adjustment. But if you make broader dietary changes alongside this, please keep your doctor informed and allow them to monitor your progress. And if you know someone who has been using diet sodas, sweetened protein shakes, or artificially sweetened coffee, believing that 0 calories means 0 metabolic impact, please share this video with them. The label is not lying about the calories, but it is not telling the whole story about the biology. Next week, we are finally arriving at the conversation this entire series has been building toward: sleep and insulin resistance. Why a single night of poor sleep raises your blood sugar measurably the next morning. Why sleep deprivation creates insulin resistance as powerfully as poor diet. And what you can begin doing tonight: specific, evidence-based, practical actions, even if sleep has been a struggle for years. It is the final major piece of this series. Do not miss it. Subscribe, hit the bell. I will see you next week. I am Dr. Sterling. Take care of yourself. And this morning, consider drinking it black. Your gut bacteria will thank you for it.